Adeline Sergeant was a British writer. She was born Emily Frances Adeline Sergeant in 1851 at Ashbourne, Derbyshire, the daughter of Richard Sergeant and Jane Hall, and attended school in Weston-super-Mare. She wrote over 90 novels and died in Bournemouth in 1904. We will cover her 1895 A Deadly Foe. We see sailor Frank Lovell meeting his beloved Nellie Dean shortly before he would go off on a trip to try and reach the North Pole. He is soon joined at his father's vicarage by his future shipmate Dr. Oliver Dyson, who seems taken at once by Nellie. He reveals to her by accident a secret kept from her by her family, that being the father she had never known, having disappeared days before she was born, being suspected of murder. Since no one had ever seen him again, the public just assumed he was guilty, and Nellie desperately refuses to taint Frank by being married to the child of a murderer. Frank tells her not to be silly, and then they get married 2 days before he leaves for the pole. The expedition is a catastrophic failure, and Dyson and Frank are the only survivors. Dyson admits he has always hated his fellow men, and how his father was the man supposed to have been killed by Nellie's father, Maurice Dean, and how he does not care and would even slay her father in front of her eyes and marry her anyway. Then one day, after Frank stops Dyson from shooting himself, Dyson sends him out to hunt a bear and then gets rescued while Frank is gone, faking Frank's death and leaving him behind in the Arctic to die. And leading them, he finds Nellie's absent father. Maurice Dean had become the king of these lost Norse people who still in some vague way worship Thor and Odin, in what he fanatically calls Bezer, his city of refuge in the wilderness. He says that he must stay there as, according to Mosaic law, he had killed without wishing to, and thus must go to a city of refuge like Bezer, which is in the wilderness, to avoid the Avenger of Blood. His fatalism is also strengthened by the fact that Dean knows that the nearby mountain pass will soon burst and flood the valley, so that their little huts will be washed away and he and his people will lie side by side beneath the frozen river, forgotten for all time. Oddly enough, while Maurice Dean develops a friendship with Frank, he has no idea he even had a child, let alone knew anything about his daughter, and never meets her. He dissuades Frank from ever trying to return, but then many months later he gives Frank a belt full of precious gemstones Dean picked up in South America as a dowry for the daughter he never knew he had, rigs out a canoe for Frank alone, and Frank leaves, never to see Maurice Dean again. In the meantime, Dyson had told Nellie Frank was dead and was trying to convince her to marry him with the support of Frank's own parents. Nellie was fading fast and says while she cannot ever love him, she agrees to marry him. But just as the ceremony starts, Frank shows up and Dyson has an epileptic fit and dies shortly after. Years later, Frank leads an expedition to the pole but finds the valley flooded and no trace of Bezer in the wilderness.